Oh, can I have some?
All right. So now we're going to move into our Tuta Loca Es section where we call out motherfuckers who are doing the most. So, I feel like things happen on social media in waves and explosions, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, a thing is happening, and it feels like it's new. But then when you do even a little bit of research, you realize that these issues aren't things that are new, they're ongoing issues that have had buildup, and there was just this inciting moment. So I'm referring to Nigeria and the End SARS movement. I follow an Instagram page called West African, and so sometimes, like every once in a while, they'll like post a thing that'll talk about something that's happening in a particular country, and I always feel like, oh, that's dope. Like there are pages that are doing that because I don't get that anywhere else. So when I saw the explosion of End SARS, I was just like, wow, like whoa, this must be this unprecedented thing that happened, that we're finally giving an African nation some more attention than we usually do. And then when I did more research, and I was thinking about the parallels of like this idea of like, yes, abuse of power through the police, I was like, why, why does this feel like new? Why weren't we like writing for each other in a way not that new? And that's not to damn us in a way where it's like, listen, better late than never. I think people are like learning, and that's wonderful. But even myself, as somebody who wants to be more informed in general, I'm like, damn, I kind of feel weird jacking it, like, because I definitely saw how they were supporting Black Lives Matter and doing protests for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So I was just kind of like, damn, that sucks. Like, I'm glad that this moment is happening in terms of us getting awoken to it, but I also want us to keep that energy. Like, what are the outlets? Like, who are we going to for this news if our news outlets aren't prioritizing that news overseas? Anyway, I had that big surge. I'd love to hear your guys' initial reactions and seeing when that news came out. And by the way, it's not just Nigeria, there's so many other countries that are going through things. So actually, even before we go into it, Skittles and I told Skittles I just want to read off some of the things that are happening in other countries, because, like I said, we know what's happening in Nigeria more so than a lot of the other places, but I don't think it is fair for us to repeat the behavior of acting like anything else that happens is a surprise. Yeah. We should be aligning as Black people across the diaspora and understanding what our liberation movement is, because when you, not to be dramatic, but when you think about even our revolution of independence in this country, it came during a time where France and other places were having this revolution. And so if we are truly having a Black revolution in this world, then what does that look like, and what should we know? Anyway, so Skittles, if you'll take the first one.
Pause. We're reading this one? Or what? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, Liberia. Rape has increased by 50% in Liberia during the pandemic against young women and children. Over 1,000 cases of rape have been reported within the last 10 months. Rape has been a growing issue since Liberia's 14-year civil war from 1889 to 2003. President George Weah has declared rape a national emergency.
In Nigeria, SARS refers to the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, a controversial Nigerian police unit that attacks, extorts, and kills innocent youth. There have been nationwide protests demanding an end to police brutality.
In Namibia, youth have been protesting, demanding immediate political action on sexual gender-based violence in Namibia. There have been at least 200 cases of domestic violence reported monthly, while more than 1,600 cases of rape were reported within the past 2 years.
In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, armed groups have been brutally attacking innocent civilians, causing more than 50,000 people to flee their homes. A great number of these people are children who do not have parents or guardians. Many people are becoming victims of rape, killings, kidnapping, and sexual violence.
In the Ivory Coast and Ghana, there has been an increase in child labor and child trafficking in Ghana and the Ivory Coast. Children are trafficked from Burkina Faso and Mali to work in Ghana and Ivory Coast on cocoa farms as slaves.
And in South Africa, South Africa battles against gender-based violence and rape. it is an estimated that at least 40% of South African women will get raped once in their lifetime.
That's crazy.
So a lot of heavy shit, like a lot of heavy shit. And, admittedly, like I have an issue with the way sometimes people like to paint African nations and only talk about bad shit and only talk about poverty and all that. But I think that the importance of understanding some of these issues, take the Democratic Republic of Congo, some of what's happening there is actually tied to something that they're mining there that's used to build technology and phones and like things for science, right? And this progression. And so when you think of that and you're like, oh shit, that's happening, but don't think that it's just like people in the Congo were like, we're going to turn against each other as a nation and we're going to fuck each other over and kill. There's
no, it's all
buying and like robbing something and being incentivized to,
all rooted in like global capitalism, you know. You can't really look at these countries and these conflicts outside of that, you know, and you can't really talk about, I hate the term like underdeveloped world because it's really like overexploited. That's the term we're using, because we really can't look at these situations and examine them outside of the context of capitalism, outside of the context of colonialism in particular. You know, like with SARS, and, you know, being half Nigerian myself. And so I like, you know, have family there that I worried about, but I also felt like I was disconnected essentially from the issue until, you know, more recently, where I just didn't quite understand the breadth of like how far spread the corruption was. I knew like it's kind of just understood, I think, like amongst the Nigerian diaspora, like, oh yeah, the police are corrupt, like it, you know, but like the SARS in particular, I didn't know how bad things were. And my cousin Catherine actually wrote like a really beautiful piece over the summer, linking the movement for Black lives in this country and the legacies of colonialism and like how that kind of tied into the police brutality in Nigeria, and how like we have to be thinking kind of like cross culturally, pan-Africanly, really, if we're thinking about liberation movements and what does liberation for Black people look like across the world. Like there is no SARS without the history of colonialism. Like that's the legacy of leadership, you know, the legacy of policing that we were left with, you know, in Nigeria, across the African experience, you know, across the Black experience, across the world. There's a level of violence that we inherited. And now I think we have to imagine our way out of, because really we have to free our minds enough to imagine a world, like what does it look like for us to care for each other communally? You know, what does it look like to envision a world that's not so heavily reliant on police and policing and prisons and, you know, cages and treating each other like animals? How do we treat each other humanely? There's got to be, you know, because clearly I think all across the world we're experiencing this like awakening. We're like, there has to be a better way than this, because this is not working.
And what has to happen to make the higher ups realize that this isn't working? Because clearly we as the citizens who are seeing it and experiencing it are coming to this awakening, but the people who are in charge are not and like
but they are. It's not working for
you. Right. Like that's the thing.
It's working as designed. Was never designed to work
for you. You know, yeah.
Doing just well and fine. So it's not, and I think the reason I say it that way is that I think we need to start speaking in those terms. It's not,
the systems are not broken, they are working exactly.
We're not loud enough, we're not unified enough, there's not enough numbers. Bullshit. They see it and it is working just fine. Thank you. Yeah. And, you know, and so I think, and that's why I think for us, this sort of being proactive about things. So like you were listening to some of the things, and I think another thing that's important in all of that is just basic read, motherfuckers. We got to start reading, like, and I say that as somebody who often is like, trying to take as much as they can from videos and stuff. And sometimes I'm like, yo, if I really want the answers to some of the questions I'm thinking in my head, I have to turn to a certain type of journalism, take an article and read it all. Yeah, like, you know, like, and that is just, I think that's just part of the beginning. It's almost like I wish that adults had homework in the way when I was in school and we would have to like read an article from the newspaper and write like
current events.
Current events.
I remember having to do current events weekly, but I think it's like so much of it now. Like I like what you said about like adults having homework, because I think that we are all kind of paying for the lack of homework that like communally adults have not done. We as adults coming up now and like adults prior to us, and we're all kind of paying for this lack of education, or this poorly constructed, or maybe not poorly constructed exactly how it was intended to, you know, it serves exactly who it was intended to serve, which is basically white people, you know?
And I wonder if I want to rephrase my question as like, what do we have to do to get the older generation to realize that it's not working, and less of like the people in charge? Because I feel like that's what the people our age are combating with the most, is like this older generation that feels like there isn't something wrong, and that feels like if you just march and if you just, you know, hold signs and scream outside of a building, that this mass change is going to happen, and that they feel like we're not doing it right, or they get upset when people are rioting and getting a little bit more rougher and violent in their protests.
Yeah. And to that, my answer is, you know, y'all had a certain level that you were trying to penetrate, and you had a certain level of resources and voice. We are talking, you know, years in advance, where it's not that much has changed about how white people or the system has gotten better or worse for us, but the fact that some of the loopholes, the things that like quite literally are the line between us still being literal slaves to this fucking country, and not that some of those slight loopholes that present themselves give us opportunity to be on the internet, to have voice, to be self-starters. We have a big burst of Black and Latinx entrepreneurship right now. Like, these things are happening in the loopholes, and so that's different. They didn't have as much as that. They had some of that. In fact, it was the opposite. It was a community. It was a Black community. I'm speaking to the United States specifically, of a strong Black community that was built and was repeatedly torn apart because it was being built with a strong foundation, even with a lack of a head start due to slavery. Like, it was just a strong foundation. That's why all these TV shows that are now going back and covering some of these massacres and stuff, that stuff is important, because we're taught our history almost like we've always been sitting around and like waiting for things to get better, and nothing ever gets better for us, and like we're doing
that liberation and like
being lazy, eating watermelon, like waiting for our welfare checks. Is not how it works. Like, that's actually not the truth of who we've been. Like, how would like historically Black institutions have started? Like, how would so many things that we have been true if the narrative that the media teaches us is also true? It's because one is a lie. One is controlled, if not a complete lie. So anyway, sorry, I got passionate there. But you know, I do think that there is a way in which what they expect looks different, but their mindset, their tools were different too. And they don't necessarily all know, because some do, because not that all older people are on the same page, right? But like, for those who don't, sometimes I think the disconnect is even like, look at their Facebook, like look at the types of memes they use. Like, they're so outdated, and like these are the
I love like when you could tell like auntie grandma Twitter versus like
the way they utilize the tool.
They use it, like an older generation is going to use the tools differently. My hope is, like, I think that the best way to stay current and to keep your mind young and to keep being active, like, and to stay on the forefront of political movements, and not, because my biggest fear is turning like 70 and 80 and being like, the youth got it all wrong. Because if anybody is going to inherit anything about the world that you are created, it's the youth. You should always be listening to them. I'm at the point now where I'm like, oh shit, we're not the youth anymore. Like, we're young, but I have a natural instinct, I think we all do, to like kind of write off Gen Z and their dumb memes and like their dumb activities that we think are dumb or whatever. But like, they are carrying a torch that we aren't, frankly. And they're the zeitgeist, and they're the culture and taste makers pretty soon. And so instead of being dismissive, my goal is to always have an ear for them and to always be kind of tapped into like what's going on, even if I know like it's not necessarily for or about me, that like that is the future talking. And whether I like it or not, the future's coming, so you better get on board. And I think that that is just one of the things that we, as we become a, you know, a different level of a different vanguard, you know, like I think that that's just one of the things that we can constantly keep in mind is not being dismissive of younger voices and their experiences and what they're saying the problems are, because and being like, oh, you think you had problems, you know, we had X, Y, and Z happen to us. Like, no, if they're having problems, that means that the work's not done. And maybe it will never be done. But at least if you need to know what direction you need to be moving, you need to be listening to them. Listen to the people that are coming behind you and are like, here's the mess we've been left behind with. Help. You know?
Yes. Well, yeah. So, guys, stay informed. Read up on it. Stay up on it. Figure out ways to get involved. I realized when the news broke for me, the first thing I was like, oh, but what do I do now? Like I was going and I was like, oh, so what do I do? Like,
and I feel like that was a general mood too. Like I saw statuses where it was like, how do we help? Like, what do we do aside? And really, I guess the answer is share the information, keep it circulating. That's a part of it, and then donate.
One of the things I saw that I was just like, oh my God, I've never heard truer words, but they were like, Nigerians, there's like, people are organizing on the ground. They're like, Nigerians do not need a voice for the voiceless. If Nigerians are anything, it's a voice, okay? Anybody Nigerian, you have never, ever lacked, we have never lacked for voice as a people. What you need to do is amplify those voices basically and listen and, you know, donate where you can and just, you know, I think continuously think about our struggles as being interconnected. Yes. You know, and getting your ass beat by the police is a problem all over the world.
That's real.